Hello and welcome everybody to the Casual Spikes podcast, episode 37, as we are on the eve of the regional championships featuring the standard format as we have the European Regional Championship hosted by Fanfinity coming up this weekend, and we are going to be bringing you essentially a rehashing of the standard metagame in a more informal capacity, as we're just going to be touching on the decks that we expect to see at the regional championship and kind of giving you an idea of what to expect when we see those decks on camera, or if you just happen to be going to the European Regional Championship, which I would be incredibly surprised if you were watching this video. But if you are, let us know somehow if this reaches you. I would greatly appreciate it. But this is kind of what we expect to see from that regional championship as the first one in the standard regional championship set, as we kind of look to this to see how it'll shape the regional championships held in the United States going on in, I believe, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Hartford, Connecticut later in the year. I believe in May, actually. That's when it is.
Yeah, it's 2nd through the 4th and 16th through the 18th. So coming right up.
Yep,
Uh,
a little bit shorter of a turnaround too, because I think we had about 3 or 4 weeks in between regional championships for Modern, and now we have like a 2 week turnaround for the United States.
yeah, and basically there's a 1 week difference between the European and then the first American or first US one, I should say. So
So
kind of crazy.
yeah, yeah, it's gonna be pretty interesting because I felt like we had a little bit of time in between, like Modern from the European to the first Modern Regional Championship in the United States to the second one in the United States. Now we're having, it's going to be bang, bang, bang. So we're definitely going to be covering what we expect for this metagame. Then we're going to be looking, of course, at the results of that regional championship next week, and we're going to kind of get an idea of what we can expect for the United States Regional Championship. So you definitely don't want to go anywhere else for that information. And if you want to be notified of those videos, please be sure to subscribe to the Casual Spikes Podcast YouTube channel, as well as ringing that notification bell so you know when future videos get posted. It's a very easy way to support the show. And of course, check out the description down below for mine and Randy's channel if you want even more Magic the Gathering content. Randy, let's go ahead and kick it off here. We're going to talk about the self bounce decks because they have kind of evolved into their own types of strategies. There isn't just one singular self bounce deck. We were used to seeing Esper and we're used to seeing Dimir, but there is actually another self bounce deck that has kind of showed up here as of late. Definitely getting bolstered a little bit by the release of Tarkir Dragonstorm, which we had gotten just a few weeks ago. Of course, this kind of juiced the standard metagame as a whole, but let's kind of start there with the bounce decks, as those seem to be the most played archetype as a whole going into this regional championship season.
Yeah, so I would talk about I think what is perceived as probably the best self bounce deck, which is Esper self bounce. Um, just in case, I guess anyone who doesn't understand the deck or doesn't know anything about the deck, the core of the deck is basically playing four Nurturing Pixies, um, some number of Fear of Isolation, some number of Sun Pearl Kirin, which is the new card coming out of the Dragonstorm, um, and then playing like Hopeless Nightmare, Storm Chaser's Talent, Nowhere to Run, and This Town Ain't Big Enough. It's pretty much like all the creatures, all the things you have to play in your deck, and you're basically a very tempo oriented deck. Anyone who knows Legacy, which is probably like nobody who listens to our channel, it's very reminiscent of like a Delver deck, essentially, where you are very focused on tempo-oriented plays, spending all of your mana every turn, and making sure your opponent's just not having a fun time. It's probably the best way I have to describe this deck.
Yeah.
Um, Esper Self Bounce has gone through a lot of changes. Ever since it first started to where we are now, and in between in the middle. So when it first started out, it was playing Optimistic Scavenger, it was playing Spiteful Hexmage, it was a very much more low to the ground, super aggressive. I'm going to punish you because you decided to have a tap land come in on play two. Why are you so stupid? Essentially, is how it was playing out to be. Fast forward to, I would say, the Pro Tour, Esper Self Balance became a lot more mid range focused. They were playing cards like Stock Up. They were playing a little bit more beefy things like Preacher of the Schism, things like that, where it was a little bit harder for the red decks to deal with. You could kind of grind a little bit more against like Domain. And fast forward to today, we have kind of come full circle. The deck is a lot more low to the ground again. We're seeing Optimistic Scavenger come back into the deck. It was originally cut just 100%. The card wasn't good. We're seeing Spiteful Hexbase come back, but that's mostly because of Sun Pearl Kieran, because it has a when it enters this, you can return up to one target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it's a token, you draw a card. So being able to bounce that roll token back to your hand and get a free card for it is just great. It's just extra juice that you don't need for this deck that it gets. And we're even coming back to where Entity Tracker is making its way back into the deck. We've also gotten to a point where we're cutting Kaido, because Kaido is no longer good in the meta. Because against the super aggressive decks, he doesn't do anything. And against like the bigger decks, he kind of is good like in the mirror. That's about the only place you want him, but you can just be better with Entity Tracker because you're going to turn through your deck faster with that card, being able to draw whenever enchantment enters the battlefield, which are already bouncing all your enchantments all of the time.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good summarization of this Esper self bounce deck, and it's a deck that we've been probably the most acquainted with, really since the beginning of the year, where we kind of saw it break out towards the end of 2024, come into the Spotlight Series in Atlanta at the beginning of 2025. And while it wasn't the self bounce deck that actually made it to the top eight, it was a deck that definitely proved that like this is a deck that can kind of have some longevity in the format, and has definitely proven that with the various different metamorphoses, the different iterations that we've seen over the past few months.
Yeah, it's definitely proven itself to be good and proven itself to if you want to play this deck, you can definitely win. Like it has a great matchup against the red aggressive decks right now. Well, against most of the red aggressive decks. We'll get to that here in a second. But like against the traditional mice package, it has a good metagame call against it. The problem is obviously then people will metagame against the Esper self bounce deck, and it comes a lot of like, what do you play against? What are you expecting? It's like that's where it gets harder to play this deck as a whole. And this deck has a lot of like decision making that matters too. Like this is not something you kind of just want to pick up and go, okay, well the RC's this weekend. I guess I'll just like buy the card for Esper and play it. Like you're not going to have a good time. Not to say any like accomplished Magic player or anybody who is smart enough to understand like the how to play the deck isn't going to get wins, but there is a lot of times when like you're trying to always bid max what you're doing. So when you sit there like, okay, well I have like three different ways to bounce. I have three different things I can bounce, but like each one of these things does something different. What do I bounce? When do I sacrifice my artifacts or enchantments to scry? When do I not? Do I bank off the top, top of my deck having a bounce spell? Do I get more value? Do I just sacrifice my only thing I can bounce? It becomes a lot of like what if and when you should do things. So it is definitely more complex than people want to give it credit for.
Oh yeah, for sure. A very skill intensive deck. Definitely trying to maximize all of those decisions because, in reality, when you get into these games and where Esper self bounce usually finds itself, I think very rarely you're going to see games where you can just kind of run away with it. By just playing Hopeless Nightmare on turn one, then playing a Pixie on turn two to pick up the Nightmare, and then replaying the Nightmare, and then basically for the next like few turns casting a Nightmare like twice a turn for all of eternity. So you definitely need to be able to maximize some of those decisions and really kind of output as much damage as you can, because this is a deck that you can put a lot of things into play and put a lot of pressure on your opponent. But then once the game kind of starts to stabilize, you have to figure out a way like, okay, how am I going to sneak in those last few points of damage? So definitely managing your permanents and how often you, or like basically which permanents that you're going to want to actually pick up and play a lot of the time, and just being aware of kind of the things left in your deck so that you're able to kind of get to a point where you can have a little bit of a inevitability and have it not be such of a challenge to get across those last few points of damage if your opponent just starts to kind of stabilize the game from a pretty fast Esper start.
Yeah, that is the definition of, or I guess the problem with this deck as a whole is all your creatures are shitty. Like there's just no like you're playing 1 and 2 drop creatures that are not like super good stats. None of like you're not playing a 2 mana 5/5 that just wins the game. Like you're playing a 2 mana 2/2, a 2 mana 2/1, a 1 mana 1/1. Like these are not just like, yeah man, and then I slammed my like just win con and they lost. It's like, no man, then I nickel and dimed them for 4 turns and won. That's like the definition of you need to be able to figure out what you're doing with this deck because it is this nickel and diming your opponent here and there.
Oh yeah, and that's kind of where Optimistic Scavenger and a lot of things. This is kind of like the card that is going to be super important for some of these decks because even just playing this on turn one is like totally fine, and getting to kind of go into like Hopeless Nightmare to like put a counter on like an Optimistic Scavenger, and then replaying a Pixie to pick up the Hopeless Nightmare, and then you have like two 2/2s in play on like turn two, and then from there you're like playing another. You're replaying the same Hopeless Nightmare. Maybe you're playing a Nowhere to Run. That's going to be two more counters. You're going to be able to put things on those creatures. Or you play your third land, then you play a Hopeless Nightmare, get a counter. Play Fear of Isolation, get another counter, pick up the Hopeless Nightmare. Just from here, you just kind of snowball that kind of advantage. And of course, when you're putting these +1/+1 counters on two, three, four different flyers, and they quickly grow out of like Nowhere to Run range. And of course, now you have some of these cards that you can kind of sacrifice if your opponent happens to play like Momentum Breaker or something like that we see in these self bounce decks. You kind of put your opponent in a pretty interesting situation where your creatures are going to outgrow some of the more popular removal spells in the format currently, outside of something like Go for the Throat that we see from some of the black decks. We actually see Destroy Evil in the list that I'm looking at by Misplaced Ginger over something like Go for the Throat as well. So it's definitely a consideration where Optimistic Scavenger is a card that is a way that you can kind of close out games very quickly, and is going to be very important if you don't have those hands necessarily, where you're going to be able to play Hopeless Nightmare 15 times in a row and definitely strip your opponent clean of cards before they're able to get 3-4 lands in play, and stick a big creature that's actually going to be able to race your board in those non-Optimistic Scavenger games.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's like the more popular version of Esper Self Balance, kind of as we talked about in like the preamble. There's like the Dimir versions, which are basically a little bit more watered down, I'd say, from the Esper Self Balance version. Obviously, you don't have the white cards, and I think that one probably leans a little bit more on Kaito. Although it sounds like if Esper's kind of cutting it, maybe Dimir is going down in lower numbers. But I would think that that's probably one of their best cards to be able to play in the two color deck.
Yeah, I'd say they're a little bit different just because they are two colors. I would also argue that the Dimir bounce is a little bit more, I would say, a little more
Streamline,
streamlined, maybe. I'm trying to think of how I would describe them. They are,
consistent.
I would say they're a little bit more like mid-range because like the Dimir mid-range and Dimir self-bounce has always been a deck that no one's really been able to figure out the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Because they play like 70 of the same 75 cards. It's like, we're different.
True.
Oh.
I play two
um,
Shieldred in my mid range deck, and that makes it mid range.
yeah.
Um,
You don't understand, Dad.
but I mean, yeah, like Demir is a little bit more. That was like the other version that we had seen early on, was just kind of a fight between these two. Like, do you need the white? Do you not need the white? But there's a version of the self bounce deck that is completely just push blue completely off to the side, which seems absolutely crazy. But has actually adopted just more of a black white build, and we saw it at the Pro Tour Aether Drift. I believe the person's name escapes me. I think they're a shitty person anyway, so it doesn't matter. But they played a version of it. I believe they were undefeated in day one, and then they ended up kind of crashing and burning after that. But it has since then gotten a few more cards that have been, I think, useful in actually giving it some longevity and making it a very potent option in the current standard metagame.
Yes, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that it is um playing, what are you, temporary lockdown. Jesus, can't think of the name of that card. Temporary lockdown, which gives it a super big edge. So like it's also a deck that like benefits from temporary lockdown too. So like it's almost like this prison lockdown style deck where you cast temporary lockdown and maybe you eat up like one of your hopeless nightmares, you eat up like a pixie, you eat up nowhere to run, and then you're like, all right, cool. I'm gonna now play another pixie. I'm gonna bounce my temporary lockdown, have all my things trigger again, maybe destroy some of your creatures, and now sit in a position where like, okay, I'm good, but I have this temporary lockdown in my back pocket that I have, and you have to play around it while also developing enough of a board state to make me not use it, but also use it at the same time.
Hmm.
And I think that's the big thing this deck has going for it. And then also it gets to be a little bit bigger with playing some Shieldred, some Bezas, um,
Man.
Preacher of the Schisms.
Yeah, That card I have thoroughly enjoyed the very few times that I've played it, and thoroughly despised every time that it's played against me. It just ends up being a card that I think is really bad if it gets bounced, but in every other situation, it's like one of the toughest cards to end up actually dealing with.
Yeah, it's definitely. I remember playing that the last time we had RC queues for standard. Um, I was like trying to qualify, not really trying, but uh, and my opponent attacked me both at 20, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll draw a card," and he's like, "And I'll make a vampire." I'm like, "No, it's or." He's like, "It's not." And I was like kind of like I was like not aggressive. I was definitely way too aggressive. Where like I kind of like snaps up the card, and I'm like, "The fuck does this mean? What do you mean you get both of them?" No.
Uh, or
Back in
tied.
my day, our creatures didn't have these abilities.
It was one or the other. You never got both.
Yeah, I didn't get these both things going on. This is some BS. I was so annoyed. I read that card and I was like, no,
Give
no, I
me
shouldn't get
both, please.
this. Yeah, my opponent was like so casual, like, yeah, I'll get both of them. Like, okay, cool,
Sure.
man.
Sure.
Back in my day, we didn't have both.
Both of them. But yeah, so, I mean that's kind of the gist of the self bounce archetype as a whole. You kind of have this 3 color build that is that can be a lot more explosive. I would say I think the 2 color builds kind of opt for a little bit of a slower, grindier approach. They're going to kind of try to slowly take over the game and just kind of control your board while also applying a decent amount of pressure. And it looks like the Orzhov builds have definitely leaned more towards being mid range, where we see a few different 4 drops and some other 3 mana creatures that kind of play around temporary lockdown, while also, as Randy said, being able to essentially exile all of your things, balance your lockdown, and then re-trigger all those things, and being able to essentially take care of whatever things your opponents might get back from temporary lockdown. So definitely some things to keep an eye out for. It seems like the Orzhov is kind of the new hotness of the format, so maybe we'll see a few more players kind of than we would normally expect to play the deck, to see if it does have some legs going forward and if there's an advantage to playing it over the Esper and Dimir counterparts.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure if there is, to be honest. I think it's one of those things where time will tell. We've seen it get played a lot. We saw it got a bunch of hype recently. A bunch of streamers had picked up the deck and like, oh my god, it's the best deck in the format. And I don't know if that's still true anymore, or if it was ever true. To be honest, I think it was just people weren't ready for people main decking 4 lockdowns.
True.
So
Well,
so we'll see.
yeah.
I'll go ahead.
I also think too that there's going to be a deck that we talk about later is probably the reason, at least in my opinion, would be the reason why players are kind of a little bit more in on playing temporary lockdown with another popular archetype as of late. And I won't
You talk about
spoil that.
you're talking about because of mice.
Not because of mice. Well, I'll point it out. I'm sure I
Okay.
won't forget.
Yeah.
But funny that you do bring that up, because unsurprisingly to anybody, at least the archetype that I'm the most fond of in this current standard format, and at least it has like the only other deck that I think has a legit argument for being like one of the best decks and has been one of the best decks for a while, has been the mono red aggro strategies, and we're going to exclude Izzet from this conversation because the Izzet deck is technically a different style of aggro deck from the mono reds, the Gruuls, the occasional, like the very occasional Boros, and even some like the Rakdos aggro decks that we've kind of seen pop up. They still kind of follow the same trajectory as some of these other red based aggro decks that aren't Izzet. So, Randy, tell us a little bit about these red aggro decks and how they share like 55 of the same 60 cards.
Yeah, so for sure, just real quick, the Rakdos decks are just mono red. They just play the sword salesman or whatever the fucking fling card. That's all it is. They played that, and most of the time they even play black lands to play that card. They're just playing it for the fling ability. I have seen some play the black lands and then play dress in the sideboard as well, and I don't know why. That was their like my go-to black card, duress. I was
Yes.
like, okay. I'm not sure why that was what you're doing, but whatever. So I mean, most of these decks that you're seeing, like the mono red aggro and the Gruul, For sure. They're all playing, Heartfire Hero, they're playing Ember Heart Challenger, and they're playing Manifold Mouse. Those are pretty much like your standard like 12 creatures you have to play, and then you can play the other things around it. So like the Gruul deck is playing like Questing Druid easily because that just gives them card advantage. Um, the big thing is like the red decks aren't sold on playing the Corey Steelcutter yet. They are playing Tursa Light Shatterer instead. It's the 2 in a red for a 3/3 haste. When it enters, discard up to 2 cards and draw that many cards. And then whenever you see attacks, if you have 7 or more cards in your library, or sorry, 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you can exile one at random from your graveyard and you can play that card this turn. Notably, it says play, so if you do hit a land, you can play that as your land for turn if you haven't played one yet. But outside of that, it doesn't matter that it says play. It just means you get to play lands.
Yep.
Um, some of them are still on Screaming Nemesis. Screaming Nemesis has also gotten cut to some decks. I've seen it being cut. Sunspine Lennox is also one of those things where either it's in the sideboard, or there's 2 in the main, 2 in the sideboard, or sometimes they have all 4 in the main deck. I don't think anyone's really doing 4 in the main right this second. And then, we're running, Monstrous Rays, we're running Burst Lightning, we're like running Lightning Strike as kind of our ways to interact with our opponent, deal them damage, force through damage, clear blockers away, things like that. There's not really too much else to say. Like honestly, if you don't know what the red aggro decks are, you either have not been playing standard, which I mean, cool for you for like clicking on this video and wanting to learn how standard works. So I'm glad you are doing that. But like also, like it says anyone who has played any kind of arena has run into this deck, whether you're in like Bronze 12 or in Mythic 1, you've played against this red aggro deck. It's not like it's something you haven't seen. Literally every tier of arenas playing that. And if you play anything on Magic Online, you've definitely played against it too. Or you played against the Gruul version, or the Boros version, or the Rakdos version.
Do you even arena, bro?
No, I try
Bronze
not to.
12.
It's toxic. Arenas is toxic.
Toxic. Look at my emotes. Howdy, partner. Yeehaw.
Arena is because its economy is toxic. It might be the worst economy out there.
I know one economy that is way worse than the arena economy, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. Unless I have Secret Service come to my front door.
Listen, man, I'm just gonna pay for the tariffs. It's okay. That's
Jesus
definitely how it
Christ.
works. Bringing
Uh,
jobs back. No infrastructure for them, but we're gonna bring them back.
we're gonna do it.
Jesus.
We're
But no,
sending the mice
the
to their door. Yeah, mono red or really mono red. That seems to be the more popular builds. It's kind of like the reason for people to kind of take this deck in particular over something like Rule or the mono red splashing the fling swordsman Callous Sellsword. Essentially, is just that you have a more consistent mana base. It's a deck that is fully on the aggro plan, where it is going to try to hit the ground running as soon as possible. It's going to deal out tons of damage in the early turns, and by the time your opponent's able to play some sort of removal spell on your big mouse, you're going to end up dealing a ton of damage, and you're playing these other burn spells to kind of finish your opponent off, or at least clear the way from some of the other smaller creatures as well. So you can get in with like your Screaming Nemesis, Tursas, Sunspine Lynxes, and stuff like that in the later turns. Or just, again, put further pressure on double striking giant nuclear mouses.
yeah,
Mice.
I mean, I think the truly biggest difference between what we're seeing now with mono red aggro and rule at this point is board Question Druid in the main, and then usually green sideboard cards out of the sideboards. Like
Mm.
that's what we're seeing. Like the ability to destroy artifacts, the ability to destroy enchantments, things like that, or like the I forget the card, the 2/1 that
Oh,
if
the,
whenever you
yeah, the Paw Patch Recruit.
yeah, Paul Patrick Root. That's like the biggest like that's the biggest green card, and I put green card in quotation marks mainly because Questing Druid is a red card. Like
Yeah.
Questing Druid, when you cast Questing Druid in Gruul, it's because it's turned like 7, and you're like, well, I guess I can play this creature out. You play it for Seek the Beast. Like I contemplated putting that in just in my um
Mono red.
mono red deck, but I mean at that point I should just play some of the other ones like
Like Ren's
Rend
Resolve.
Resolve
Yeah.
or yeah. So I forgot that card was illegal in standard. Not gonna lie.
Not for long, but it's legal.
No, we have until Final Fantasy still. Like we have time.
We got like forever. Don't
It's on,
even. Final Fantasy.
but no, I think that if we were to break down like what we think was going to be at the RC, I think that like you can firmly put Esper and like Mono Red slash Gruul slash Boros slash Rakdos. All those are one deck. Wachi will separate them because they want to, but it's not. They're all basically the same. You're playing the same mouse package in all of them. I would put both of those probably at between 15 and 20% of the metagame is going to be those two. Like one's going to be 15 and 20, the other one's going to be 15 to 20, and everything else is fighting for the last percentages. Like I firmly believe that Mono Red or the Red Aggro decks will take up 15 to 20%, and Esper will take up 15 to 20% just because they are by and large the two best decks in the format.
Yeah, I think that you would have to have both like Demir and Gogori like mid range. Like if like because I know Star City the last few the two regional championships for Modern they started condensing some of the archetypes. So we saw like for example like Breach, which was like Teamer and Four Color were put together. We saw the different energy variants, was like Jeskai or Boros or whoever. Like they ended up kind of getting lumped together. Naya Energy was even like thrown in with that as well, with probably the overwhelming majority being like Teamer Breach or Boros Energy. So if Fanfinity or whoever's, I believe it's Fanfinity hosting the event, if they do that sort of thing, I could see a lot of like the bounce and like the mouse aggro decks being like 45 to 50% of the metagame just on the first weekend, and then anything else that's like looking to be at like 10% would probably have to be lumped together. And I think that would probably be something like the various different mid-range strategies of the deck, maybe a few of these other decks that we're talking about, like we're going to be bringing up like Jeskai Oculus. Maybe there's people that are playing like Azorius. There's enough people playing Jeskai that maybe even straight up Azorius builds will be enough to kind of bump it up close to that 10% if it's not at 10%. But I think by and large, we're expecting Bounce and Mice Aggro to be the front runners for the early parts of this format.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about the other maybe is it aggro or is it not?
Absolutely, we want to talk about Is It Aggro, because it is a deck that we purposely admitted from that little aggro blurb, because it is the only red based aggro deck that is not doing the Heartfire Hero, Manifold Mouse, Emberheart Challenger, Monstrous Rage, like hit you for 32 on like turn 3. It's trying to do it in arguably a lot more fun way by actually being a more spells based aggro deck, kind of spearheaded by Corey Steel Cutter and Slickshot Show Off, because there was a time not too long ago where we thought Slickshot Show Off was like the greatest red creature ever printed, and it only took the printing of Corey Steel Cutter and however many years later for it to not be for it to be a powerful creature in standard.
Yep. So I did a video about this as well. If you guys want to check out my channel about, I kind of went a little bit more in depth of like different key cards and things like that. But I definitely made that joke where I was just like, "Yep." And we have Is It Aggro that's playing, Mindstudy Swiftspear and Slickshot Show Off. Essentially, what was the best red card ever printed until Mice came.
Yep.
Like it went from just like Slickshot Show Off is gonna wreck standard and Modern's not gonna be able to handle this to was there a card that got printed that we thought was good? You remember that red card we were talking about like 6 sets ago that was good? Dude, what was that called? I don't
Turns out.
remember.
Turns out.
Turns out the Mice Infestation was way better.
Not just a flash in the pan, as it turns out, the bird has become the prey.
Yeah. Apparently mice are really good at hunting birds. Who knew? Who
Very
knew?
true. They definitely pack more of a punch than this bird wearing a cowboy hat.
Um, but Is It Aggro is definitely a deck that like is very different from the red aggro deck. So like the red aggro decks are running like 25 creatures on average. I would say somewhere between like 22 and 25 is where they really like end up hitting their good marks at.
Mm,
Is It Aggro has eight creatures registered. 8 cards that have the creature type.
yeah.
Um, to round that out though, so they're playing Monster Swift Fear, Slick Shot Show Off. They're also playing 4 Cordy Steelcutter as our other Soda quote unquote creature, and then we're running 4 Storm Chaser's Talent because that card's just everywhere. Turns out that it was the best card all along.
True. Also funny to note is that when we've talked about not this time, but as we talked about mono red aggro before, like Monastery Swiftspear being like probably the worst 1 mana creature in the deck, actually getting cut from the mono red decks, and then it just slots into the non-mouse like super dedicated like aggro deck.
Yeah, I will say Swiftspears also making a comeback in some of the Gruul decks because they're running the Cordy Steelcutter too. So like it
Yeah.
is making a slight comeback. But it is funny like because before Cordy Steelcutter came out, we had basically made the joke. I was like I don't know why anyone plays Monastery Swiftspear. I'm like it's just the worst red card. It's just like it's so bad, and then it's just like actually I'm still here, motherfuckers. I don't know
Yep.
if you forgot me, but like I still am played, which
True.
is just wild to me that he's still here, still vibing, still doing well. Will rotate out though at rotation until we reprint him in Final Fantasy.
Sag.
They'll find a way.
Yeah. But the big thing about this is that aggro deck isn't just the fact that like all of a sudden, the Swift Spear and Slickshot Show Off are now like the best red creatures to be playing in the format. Really, this card Corey Steelcutter is absolutely amazing in the context of the current standard format. And I've talked about it before, where this card essentially allows you to blank a lot of the targeted removal in the format, where we see like Nowhere to Run. We see, like Momentum Breaker is like another card that it sort of kind of checks because you're able to, make a token with Corey Steelcutter, and like you can even just sack that. A lot of times, probably being better than, well, not really being better than Swift Spear, but you know what I mean. It's definitely a card that blanks a lot of the targeted removal, blanks a lot of the, like sacrifice a thing removal, and really aside from the temporary lockdowns and stuff, there's no clean answer to something like a Corey Steelcutter in the main. So it's just a card that, as like Randy was talking before, it's just like there's times where you just draw 2 of this card and it's just impossible to lose a game from that point. And definitely you'll put some of these Esper slash like self bounce players through the ringer if they don't have any answers for Corey Steelcutter.
Yeah, I will say it's like the biggest draw of Is It Aggro is the fact that it can beat. I think it has a better matchup against the Esper bounce decks or the bounce decks in general because Corey Steelcutter is just a pain to deal with, right? It's constant card advantage. You're constantly making creatures, and it's even Corey Steelcutter triggers on your opponent's turn too. So even if like say you want to play like a much more slow game or you're like trying to like slow down the game, you're like okay, well end of your turn, I'll burst lightning one of your creatures. I'll opt trigger Corey Steelcutter. Go to my turn. I now have 2 creatures instead of the one I had, or I have 1 creature already. Now I get to trigger Corey Steelcutter again. So it gets to do a lot of these like things that you shouldn't be able to do, where like you're turning your air into card value as well. Because it does play a lot of air. Like we're playing 4 ops, 4 sleight of hands. Like those are just like they're not bad cards. Obviously, we've seen them played in multiple different formats, multiple different decks. Like it's not bad cards, but they are do nothing cards, right? Like they're card selection. You're trading 1 mana and a card to find a better card
Mm-hmm.
instead of just playing a better card. But when you're triggering Corey Steelcutter, you're triggering your prowess effect. They now become extra good because they're now doing the other things besides just card selection. And that's what makes this deck so big and so viable. Like, Is It Aggro was not a viable deck until Corey Steelcutter came out. I do think it'll be interesting to see what kind of evolutions we have with Corey Steelcutter. I was talking to another friend of mine, and they were talking about playing like Tolerating Terror in the deck as well as just like another big beefy creature you can play. That we saw get played during Eddie Merc Crab deck that was running around my favorite deck. Um, so I do think that there's a lot of different things we can do with Is It Aggro. I'm also worried Is It Aggro might just be a flash in the pan. So I think Cordy Steelcutter is really good, right? But I don't know if the rest of what we're doing is worth what we're doing with the deck. That being said, because it's such an aggro-based deck, it's playing, Monstrous Rage, it's playing Corey Steelcutter, it's still going to win games against decks because it does dumb things and deals a lot of damage.
Yeah, I think is it I think is definitely being carried pretty hard by Corey Steelcutter by the fact that like we hadn't really seen a spells based aggro deck, and now we are seeing it, and I think Corey Steelcutter has a lot to do with again with the context of the standard format, and I think the fact that you have like Slick Shot, Show Off, Monastery Swift Spear, these are just like ways. I mean, technically eight eight 1 mana prowess creatures to play on turn one with Storm Chaser's talent, if you include that with like Slick Shot Show Off as well. There's just like a scenario where you get into where kind of where I really like the mono red decks. This is a deck can just kind of close the door very quickly on your opponent and just put immediate amounts of pressure on them early on. And then you're also not afraid to like get in the weeds with a lot of these like mid-range decks because if you're just able to trigger Corey Steelcutter like every turn cycle and you're making two monks over the on your turn, one on your turn, one on your opponent's turn, that eventually you just make an imposing board full of 1/1s and just slowly just start to attack your opponent. That you attack with like 5 or 6 prowess like 1/1s, and then all of a sudden you go opt torch the tower. This town ain't big enough. Like that's just a bunch of damage, and you're gonna get more value by doing the this town ain't big enough thing. So, I mean, and also get a token in that flurry of exchange. You just get to make another token too. So I think it's a deck that is going to have a little bit of staying power. I just think that in terms of the other aggro decks, I would prefer to play a more streamlined. Like we're going to just try to be as fast as possible and then try to finish the game with burn spells if it really comes down to it, while also just like for sure guaranteeing that we're going to be able to punish a lot of slow starts from some of the Esper builds, maybe them stumbling on lands, period, or just stumbling on colors as well.
Yeah, I will say I like the mono red deck because of that, and I will say as someone who has watched the Izzet deck kind of play out and watch people play it versus like some of the mice packages and stuff like that, you have definitely can see where the mice deck is just better. Like it's way more streamlined, it's way more aggressive, and like Corey Steelcutter is great, but like I'd much rather be going like turn one mouse, turn two manifold, attack you for four on turn two, and keep setting up my board state. And now you have two creatures you have to deal with because if you leave manifold mouse alive, I'm just gonna play another. I'm gonna play Challenger on turn three. Get a free Valiant trigger. Oh, I flipped over Monstrous Rage. Here's more damage coming at your face. Like you need to deal with this kind of problem. As to where the Izzet deck does play a lot better at a long game, where you have four stock ups in your main deck. Like you have this ability to just like, oh okay, turn three, I'm just gonna refill my hand. Do these things. So like it's a very good deck, but I do think that like if I'm gonna be trying to be aggressive, I think that's where I want to be. Same thing where I think right now might be the best time, and I'm going to be testing this out of playing like the mono green deck or not mono green, mono red deck or the Gruul deck with the ley line in the main deck,
Mm-hmm.
and then just have four Cordy Steels in the sideboard to
Oh
where you can
yeah.
play a longer grindy game on game two and three when people are more prepared for the leyline deck, the leyline, and then just having leyline on, being able to have the most explosive starts I can on game one, and then game two and three. Like, well, did I side them out? Did I not? How's your hand look? Did you keep all a heavy removal hand? Well, that's cool. I have two Cordy Steel Cutters in my hand. I'm glad you have five removal spells. They're not gonna last.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're gonna have to burn through my spells.
I kind of like that idea of that shift where a lot of the times being like the aggro deck, you're going to see a lot more removal spells and more of an emphasis on the removal spells, especially if you're on like the mono red or the mice aggro variants of aggro, so that you could potentially see more people bringing in cards like Torch the Tower being a card that's very prominent right now. You could see more people playing like what's it, Witch Stalker Frenzy and things like that. So definitely just having an option where it's like I'm gonna have a repeatable source of damage that also doesn't like detract me too much from like my main game plan as well, and kind of put you in a bind is really nice. Plus having the mice with like an equipment in play as well, being Corey Steelcutter, you can also trigger the Valiant abilities as well. So with certain cards, you're either gonna get card advantage, or you're just gonna get a really big like manifold, or yeah, not manifold mouse, the Heartfire hero as well.
Yep, it is just kind of ridiculous. I think that's probably where you want to be at, and I got some testing to do for sure. But like, I don't think I'm playing as aggro. I have all the cards for it now, or I will. I guess I'm waiting on my Corey Steel Cutters to come in the mail, because I need two more. I need the cutters.
Hew, hew, hew.
Oh, But I mean, I definitely think that's where you want to be at is playing. I think if you're playing aggro, you want to be on Corey Steelcutter. Like it's just that good. It's just a matter of like what you're building around with it, whether you're doing mice package and is it prowess package or what. But you definitely want to be playing for that card.
For sure. But this is not just all self bounce, mid range gobbledygook and aggro, and the choice is whether you want mice or birds. There is some other nuances to the format. We're going to go over two decks that have been performing very well as of late, and they kind of offer two different perspectives, I would say, of kind of like the same color combination here. So the first one that we're going to look at is the Jeskai Oculus deck. And a lot of you would know it as more of like the blue white, the Azorius like Oculus decks that we saw. I would say towards the end of like 2024, like beginning of 2025, like we saw a version of this deck in the Pro Tour, and it actually ended up making a one of the spots in the top 8, and was a deck that looked really good and has kind of taken a new kind of shape to the deck. As it, I would say it's not necessarily all in on the card Abhorrent Oculus, which is usually like the best card to kind of bring back with some of the cards available to us, and has actually kind of taken shape as kind of this weird like combo-y like value deck that I don't know, to me personally just looks really sweet.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely sweet. I'm not sure who first discovered it, but people finally realized that Prof's memory is still in standard. Much like most cards, people forget that are in standard.
Mm-hmm.
So Prof's memory, just to give you a quick recap, is a legendary enchantment that is one in a blue. When it enters, you draw a card. You have no maximum hand size, and then at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you had drawn more cards than one card this turn, you put X +1/+1 counter to target creature you control, where X is the number of cards you've drawn this turn -1. So you don't get a free +1/+1 counter from just drawing your card that you're going to draw every turn.
Mm-hmm.
So this deck already draws a bunch of cards because we were already playing, Fear of Missing Out. We were playing Stormcore Scholar as were like the two big ones. We used to be playing some other draw spells. Now we're playing Glacial Dragon Glacial Dragon Hunt, which is a new card, obviously from Tarkir. Um, Blue and a red sorcery. You get to draw a card, then you may discard a card, and then when you discard a card, when you discard a non-land card, you get to deal 3 damage to any target, which is a big thing for this deck. Where a lot of times, they were playing Shard of Course, which draws 2, discards a card, essentially. But it doesn't advance your board state, right? It doesn't give you any kind of advantage. It doesn't give you anything for doing it. So you were just losing this like early game pressure against like the red aggro decks, where it's like they're just curving out 1, 2, 3, and like, cool, man. On turn 3, I'm gonna get to put a tapped Oculus into play and then die on turn 4. Awesome. Like that's
Yep.
not what you want to be doing. So being able to now interact with the board state by doing that is super nice. And they're also playing the new Light Shatter Tursa, that haste 3/3 that you get to discard up 2 cards, draw 2 new cards. So just more. They have more discard abilities. They have better interaction as well with the Dragon Hunt. So just overall, they've gotten a lot better. They're also playing the new Marauding Mako, the Shark Pirate. So you're already discarding cards. You just give a 1-drop now that like actively wants you to be discarding cards. So just they've gotten a lot better at being more than just, all right, when someone plays Rest in Peace, we just scoop.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was the big problem with the white or the blue white word first is like it just died to Graveyard Hate hard. Like I loved that deck, and I think I played one league with it and was immediately like, no, we're good. I'm tired of losing to Graveyard Hate. Um, but definitely just got Oculus is in a much better position. It has a decent matchup against the bounce deck because you actively want to be discarding Oculus. So like when they're nightmaring you on one, you can live the dream. And I've had it happen against me where there's like, cool, discard Oculus, turn 1, play Helping Hand, and there's like, all right, cool, that's a 5/5 in play. That's also making another 2/2 on my turn. All right, why did I play this deck again? Why did we play Hopeless Nightmare? What was the strategy here? So you do get to like live some dreams against the Esper deck. The biggest problem though is I think this deck still struggles against aggro as a whole. especially because your helping hands put things into play tapped, so it's not like you're getting that blocker immediately. Obviously, if you get to the mid to late game where you're making these big flying creatures, obviously the red deck has nothing it can do against it, but you got to get to that point, and it can be hard. And you still have to try to develop a board. Like, you still have your own little game plan. So if you're just killing all their creatures but not developing anything, it doesn't matter because they're just going to go, okay, cool. 1, 2, 3 turns later, they're just going to have another board state, and you've already wasted all your removal. Like, you got to have this weird balance. I do think this deck is not well positioned against the aggro decks, which worries me a lot. Trying to like register this for a big tournament where we just said we both think mono red's gonna be 15 to 20% of the metagame. Like, do you want to register a deck that has like maybe a 50-50 at best, possibly a 60-40 in their favor against you?
Yeah, you sometimes you just gotta hope to end up on the right part of the matchup matrix, and there's actually being like looking at this deck, there's a few things I really like about it. Um, Really, a lot of the thing I probably really like the most is like the Prof's eidetic memory part of this deck, where you just end up being able to just play out your things, and they're already going to naturally draw you cards. Like Steam Core Scholar, this is something that we'd seen like way back, I think, when we had like March of the Machine ish kind of standard, where we saw like the Dimir kind of like the Dimir draw decks, is what I'll call them, where we would see like, or I guess Dimir Proft, where we would see people play Proft on like turn one, and then they would put like a counter on their like Spyglass Siren or whatever. And then we would see them place like Steam Core Scholar to then just make a 4/4 Vigilance flying creature that was just going to be able to beat down just on that, and just kind of see like these counters kind of get spread around here. And with Profs, I think this just gives the deck a whole different angle of attack, rather than, play things, discard cards, like hope to find Oculus to discard, and then hope to find Helping Hand or Recommission to bring it back, and then just slowly kind of take over the game with a giant Oculus and potentially hit more of them. This just gives you more, this makes your other flyers just bigger threats as well, and allows you to close out games very quickly, because with decks like this, it only takes like, we'll say a board wipe, and then your opponent kind of reestablishing control of the game, and making it very hard for you to come back as well.
Yeah, I will say the list that I'm looking at right now, what's got second place in a challenge, was playing just helping hand. They're not even playing the recommissions anymore.
Yeah,
And I think it kind of speaks volumes that the deck has gotten away from this all-in strategy of like, all right, we have to discard Oculus, we have to bring it back for 1 or 2 mana on like turn 3, turn 4. Like, this is what we have to be doing. And like now it's like, no, 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 we have you know creatures that have text on them. We have Prost memory that can make our creatures big enough to where they're a real threat and they demand to be answered. And it's not just people are holding up removal for our Oculus and then just like outracing us against our 1/1s and 2/2s.
yeah. Even the list that I'm looking at here too was ended up getting first place in the challenge. They're also on the 4 helping hand, which I think just speaks to the fact that this deck seemingly can just kind of churn through your deck relatively quickly. That like statistically, you're very likely to find a helping hand, and I don't think you're so much in on this because we don't even see cards like the Pixie or whatever, where like you look at the top four and then you get like a
Oh,
fairy instance, where yeah, Picklock Prankster. We don't see that any, or at least in the deck that I'm looking at, we don't really see that anymore. So I think it's just kind of the fact that it went away from needing to do this thing. It can just naturally play out its cards. You can just cast an Abhorrent Oculus, maybe not necessarily on turn three, maybe in some special cases you can, but you can just naturally play out games, play these other cards, and then eventually get to the point where, okay, I'm just going to cast an Abhorrent Oculus. And then if you remove it, guess what? I have Helping Hand just to bring it back. So it's just like the fact that you need to deal with this card multiple times, and I think it is just a testament to the fact of the deck is able to move away from that 2 color, play a third color, play and get some value, introduce a sub strategy to the deck that is also relatively powerful, while also just kind of keeping the core identity of the deck.
yeah. It's kind of funny because like it's secondary gameplay is just attack with creatures. that
Yeah.
aren't Oculus. Like that's kind of why I laughed. Like, yeah, and it came out with like a secondary game plan. I was like, yeah, secondary game plans is like most decks' first game plan. All right, we're gonna play creatures. We're gonna move sideways, and they're gonna attack them. And Oculus is like, what if that's our secondary plan? Our first plan is just to get Oculus on the field as quick as possible.
You might even be able to argue that the plan A might just be like do profs things, and then like you just happen to have like essentially like unearth in your deck for like
Yeah,
whatever else. I mean, you know,
yeah. I guess I would argue that that seems like what the deck has come to is like it's essentially playing Unearth. It's almost like the Dimir Unearth decks that we saw in Modern, where like we have like we're just playing, we're playing good creatures already, and then like if we get to happen to like, oh, we discarded, we played Frog and discarded Oculus and then unearthed it on turn three. That was just good value, and
mm,
that's kind of like what this deck is doing. We're like we're already turning through our deck with like the card selection from Fear of Missing Out, Steam Core Scholar, Tursa, Dragon Hunt, and Winter Night Stories that makes props look good. What if we just also happen to have like, oh, and we just reanimated this 5/5 that's going to win the game by itself
yeah,
instead of what it used to be was like, what if we just reanimated a 5/5 on turn two? How can we do that the most efficiently and just lose the graveyard hate immediately?
right, yeah. So I don't know. There's some things I really like about this deck. You can kind of get me on board with it. It looks sweet.
I don't hate this deck. I will say I've played versions of this deck. Now, obviously, this is not. I've not played the newest versions they're playing, yet. But I will say that a lot of times this deck feels like it loses to itself a lot. Um, I don't know how this deck plays like 22 lands. I think when I was playing it, maybe it was playing 23 lands. You somehow will always never miss a land drop. You will just you will have land drops from turn one to turn 12
Got him.
because you will draw all the lands. And that was my biggest problem with this deck. And it was playing multiple leagues. It wasn't like, oh, this happened one time, variants, I'm not going to play deck. It's like, nope. Like, third league in a row, I've lost, like, my games I easily would have won if I drew any of my spells, but instead I drew 17 lands this game. How many lands are we running? 22? Okay,
22.
thanks.
We flooded.
Yeah. So that is, I will say, the biggest problem I've noticed with the deck. And mulligans a lot. What it can obviously handle mulligan and give a lot of cards that like just cycle through and see new cards. But I think the biggest problem is this deck loses to itself and does not have the best aggressive matchup. At least the last time I was playing it. Now, obviously, we didn't have Dragon Hunt when I was playing it last, so maybe that card has made the deck a lot better against the aggressive decks. I'm not 100% sold on it myself.
That's fine. Be a hater.
Listen, man, I play League of Legends. I'm already a hater.
Soul strong. Well, a deck that I know that you're not going to be able to hate on because I think it's a beloved archetype in the Randy universe. And the last deck that we'll talk about for today being Jeskai Control. Now, to be fair, there were some like blue white control decks that were pretty popular, and I think a lot to do with them introducing a third color to the deck instead of just staying blue white, just because it gets some pretty powerful cards here. I mean, we have cards like Lightning Helix that have been in the format that are just really good at. Killing creatures on the aggro side while also buffering your life total a little bit outside of your opponent shooting their own screaming nemesis. So that's pretty cool there. This list in particular I'm looking at is playing a Braid. You're playing the Shiko Paragon of the Way, which is one of the new dragons from Tarkir Dragonstorm that gives you an insane amount of value while also giving you a pretty big body to play offense and defense with. And I know Randy's personal favorite card in the set, Jeskai Revelation.
Card's trash. I'll stand by that statement.
I guess it's also even playing like Rediscover the Way, which is also a really cool card to flash back with Shiko Paragon of the Way, which doesn't require you to actually cast the card. You just get to create a copy of it, but at the cost of exiling it from your graveyard when it enters. So you have a lot of good 3 mana plays out of this deck that you can just play Shiko with and get a ton of value with, or just end up getting like a key removal spell as well to kind of throw some tempo your way. And again, being a creature that's also fairly aggressive offensive defense is probably reason enough to at least consider the third color and then look for other cards that are going to complement it very well. Which I think we are. I think we see that pretty handedly.
Yeah, so I do love the fact that it's playing two Abrades in the main, 100% because of Corey Steele. Like 100%.
Mm.
This deck is running 4 temporary lockdown, and it's like we need a braid as well for Corey Steele. We need 6 answers for Corey Steele. Like I think that speaks to the power of Corey Steele, 100%. I also want to point out this is a first deck. Do you remember they had the land cycle in this set where it was like, if they come into play as long as you have whatever the opposing colors would match up with like that. Um, Shard or Sphere or Tribe or whatever we're calling
Yeah,
them,
Wedge.
Wedge. So this is the first deck to run any of those cards or any of those lands that we've gone over. And I will point out that it is the Corey Mountain Monastery. So it's that 4 mana, exile top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play it.
Oh
Just
yeah.
want to point out that I think that land set cycle is not that good. I want to continue to argue that the point of the blue one is trash and only hyped up because of EDH.
True.
Um, I just need to say that because my short on that did not do well, and I want to argue it here because I have nowhere else to argue it.
I want to do all over it.
No, I thought that was cool though. This is the first deck to play one of those lands though from the land cycle.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So
and you know
I
what?
think that's
Notably, I have a copy of this card now, so maybe I should just build Jeskai Control for the RC that I'm not going to.
listen. If you want to build this deck and do Qs, I will help you.
No, I will play Mana Traders. I'll do that.
I
Well, yeah, I
have
use
I
Mana
have
Traders.
I have most of this deck. I have like all the expensive stuff.
Get out of here. We're not playing this deck. But I mean, it's at least interesting to kind of look at because I know, I mean, control decks typically like when they're good, they end up being fairly popular. And this actually would be a deck that I'm not surprised if there's a good amount of people that end up opting to play this sort of deck. There's a lot to like. Again, just some of the cheap, efficient removal spells. Lightning Helix seems great with a metagame full of like aggro decks. 3 damage is kind of the key number there because it does kill a lot of the red creatures. Obviously, you're going to have a little bit smaller of a window against like the self bounce decks that are playing, really Esper self bounce, that are like trying to go big with Optimistic Scavenger. But cards like Rediscover the Way, Stock Up, going to give you a ton of value, are ways that, not a bad turn 3 play, but also a card that just feels backbreaking when you play it, on like the 8th, ninth, or 10th turn of the game when you have just like 6, 7 mana available to you and just infinite amount of possibilities to just completely bury your opponent from actually winning the game. Shiko being an absolute value machine. Beza still being a really good card against the aggro decks. Not just game ending when you resolve it and you end up getting fish or life or whatever, but definitely a card that bolsters your life total and can kind of accelerate you into that mid game where you're going to be looking to play Shiko, get a little bit of value from like your Rediscover the Way, and again, kind of push the game to the point where your opponent's not going to have an opportunity to get back in the game, or like you're going to have to run very poorly and they're going to have to run very hot for them to kind of be at parity in those matchups.
Yeah, I don't hate this deck by any means. I am worried about this deck as a whole in the sense of like it looks really good, but like this deck definitely will have the problem of like you draw the wrong half of your deck sometimes, where like you're playing against a mid-range strategy and you draw all your temporary lockdowns and stuff that don't matter, or vice versa. You're playing against the aggressive deck and like yeah, you draw like a lightning healer or two, but you never see any temporary lockdowns. You have to tap out on turn 3 for like stock up to try to find something, and then you just die.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes me wary of control decks in 2025 is like short of them getting to play, I don't know, like the One Ring. You really don't want to necessarily, I think, tap out fairly early with some of these decks. There's definitely some things that make me worried, especially like with mono red, just the fact that they can kind of put a bunch of damage out there out of nowhere seemingly. So definitely a deck where you're going to be maybe not mulliganing aggressively, but you're going to really be hoping that your 7 and 6s have some form of like early interaction and a few pieces of early interaction, and then hopefully a card like Stock Up to kind of round it out and just say, okay, do I need more of this interaction where I need like temporary lockdown and lightning helix, or can I go and dig for like land plus like Shiko or land plus Beza, whatever, and kind of again, get to the point where we can start to formulate a plan where we're going to further keep our opponent off of applying a lot of pressure to us while also figuring out how we're going to close out the game.
The concepts of a plan, some might say.
This deck does have a lot of concepts of plans, so it must mean that it's really good.
I will also say, in the fact that this deck is running a lot of the verges, essentially, it does get to a point where like I've seen this deck like just fail because it doesn't draw the right colors, or it screws itself out not having blue or enough white or whatever, because you can't afford to have like the pain lands that you can afford to have in like Esper bouts, for example, where you're such an aggressive tempo style deck that like, okay, yeah, I did 5-6 damage to myself this turn, but you never had a creature on board, so it didn't matter. Like you were just never going to deal damage to me, so that, yeah, I did a fourth of my life total to myself, but it made sure that you were never going to be able to actively do anything, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And I think like because of that, that is what worries me probably the most too, is it being a 3-color deck in standard, despite the fact we just had a 3-color set, and which is like, what's mana fixing?
It's
So
really. Go ahead.
I do think that is a big problem for this deck as well. Not saying that like you're gonna lose like half your games to that problem, but I will say that like when you have you have 3 verges and you're not have all your colors, that is a definition of a problem.
Yeah, the fact that one of the three verges just doesn't tap for blue mana on its own, like they have two that tap for white and another one that taps for red, and then they tap for the other color if you have the corresponding basic land type. So definitely sucks that there is no just like Flood Farm Verge doesn't just tap for blue and then adds white for whatever. So you're really on
Yeah.
these playing your white and red cards early while hopefully finding some kind of whatever the surveil land.
Yeah, you're really leaning on your 7 surveil lands, hoping to have that on turn one,
Yeah, because
because basically any of them will turn on all your verges, but it is just one of those things. And then you are running 7 surveil lands now, so like it is a definite drawback of like that is a tap land, always tap land.
mm-hmm.
So it is just like I said, I don't think this is a bad deck to take. I don't think this is like you're not gonna get laughed out of the room for coming to an RC with it. In fact, I do think this will probably be about 5% of the European RC will be on this Jeskai control list. People love control as a whole. I'm a big fan of control lists myself. I've played a lot of different control style decks throughout multiple formats. I think the only thing I haven't played control in is Legacy because I don't have money for that.
Amen.
Or Vintage, obviously, but that goes without saying. But I do think that this deck isn't bad by any means, but I definitely think this is a definition of you have to run hot style deck, or you have like when you're like when this deck is firing all cylinders and you have your tap land on turn one into your verges on turn two, turn three, turn four, and you just like are having the answer every turn. Yeah, it's gonna look like the world's greatest deck to play, right? Like you're just like I am unstoppable, nothing's going to beat me, and then when you fumble on turn two, turn three, and the red decks are just like dominating you. You're like, why did I register this? What did I see in testing? Because I don't know what it was, and that's like my biggest problem for this style deck.
Just need to be bigger brain, my friend. Expand your knowledge.
Well, you just gotta palm that Mystic Archive to the top every time.
Whatever. Um, but yeah, is there any other things that you want to point out, talk about for the standard format?
Um, I don't think so. Anybody who is planning to go to the RC, any of them, whether it's European, China, Japan's, Brazil's, Canada's, US's, I'm sure I'm missing a country in there somewhere. I apologize. Do not register Go Guardian Midrange. Just literally whatever you take, just do not register that deck.
PSA.
Um, I have said this for the entire time I did the standard metagame breakdowns. I said that Golgari was a trash deck. I continue to stand by that statement for the longest time. I stand by that statement today. And if someone wins an RC with Golgari midrange, I will personally eat a Mosswood Dread Knight. on camera
Yes, please.
because there is no way this deck is going to end up winning an RC.
Oh boy. All right, we're gonna put that's gonna be like the dollar bill like held up by the little thumbtack. Like we're gonna remember this.
That's fine.
I'm gonna make a note
I'm
of
just
it right
saying, like,
now.
I am very confident in the fact that Golgari mid range is a trash deck.
Oh boy.
I'm also very confident the only people running it on Arena are people who bought into that deck early on and don't have wild cards.
Fair,
I
fair.
don't know why anyone registers it on Moto though. We have rental services. Play a real deck,
Please, please, please. Um,
or just buy one. All these decks are super cheap on Moto. Well, I take that
true.
back. Is it aggro? It's not super cheap on Moto. It's a $300 deck.
Because Corey Steelcutter is probably like $50 trillion.
Yeah. I mean, uh, Corey Steelcutter is $130 of the $300,
Yeah, I believe that.
and Storm Chaser's talent is 75, and Slickshot Show Off is another 35 on Magic Online.
The rest of the deck is like basically nothing.
Yeah, there's like nothing worth money. Also, stock ups are also $20 on,
Yeah,
or $20 for a playset on Moto.
some of the lands and stuff too. But man, like, wow.
Yeah, Corey Steelcutter's doing a lot of heavy lifting with that price tag.
Mm. Love me some online play. Well, alrighty. That's all
But
I
yeah,
yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, I don't think I have anything else to really talk about for the what's going on here. I mean, I
Regional,
think
the regional championship.
yeah, I think that's pretty much all I can say for sure is that, like, honestly, if you're trying to figure out what to play, you can't go wrong with a an aggro deck. Like, pick and choose with when you want to play, or if you have even a week's time to learn Esper bounce, take that. Adds a good matchup against the aggro decks. Just learn how to beat Oculus or dodge it. Which, I mean, it's not like you can't beat it. We're running Rest in Peace in the sideboard and things like that. Like, you can easily beat the Oculus's decks. It's not like it's just like, oh, I have no idea how to win against this deck. I'm just gonna lose. Like, it's not that bad, but
Boo. Oh boy. Well, alrighty. That's gonna do it for episode 38 of the Casual Spikes podcast. We'll be coming back next week with the results of the regional championship in Europe, and hopefully we'll kind of see some of these decks, maybe a little bit of the very few predictions that we actually made for this regional championship. We'll see if any of them come true, and who knows, maybe Randy will be eating a Mosswood Dread Knight next week. Who knows?
they're definitely not. I say my prediction is that the top eight's going to be filled with Esper, Mono Red, and Is It.
Uh,
That's going to be like six of the eight.
I think that we're gonna end up seeing like some kind of like off the wall like bullshit in the top eight. Like I think that we're gonna see like self bounce, but I think that Esper self bounce is gonna be something that ends up like coming up short, and it's gonna end up being like the 2 color variants more so than the 3 color build. And then also mono red is just kind of mono red.
Mono Red's going to mice out.
Exactly. Well, alrighty, folks. I hope you all enjoyed the episode. If you did, please, please, please leave a like on the video. And of course, subscribe. If you have not already, just go ahead and double check down there below. It'll be a free, easy way to support the channel and support the podcast. And of course, check out mine and Randy's YouTube channels, as those are linked in the description down below. Again, next week, we're going to be looking at the results of the regional championship in Europe. And we'll kind of see how things go. And we'll be able to maybe more accurately predict what a metagame will look like as we kind of go forward, because like Modern, we thought we understood the metagame going into it, and turns out we just didn't realize how good we had it before. So who knows, maybe we'll kind of get that same kind of reality after this regional championship starts and kicks off.
Will be interesting to see. Also, comment what you think is going to do well at the RC here in Europe. I'd love to hear what people think is going to win, what people think is going to be like the dark horse of the tournament, essentially. Let us know.
Alrighty, folks. That's going to do it from us here over at the Casual Spikes YouTube channel. Again, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Leave a like on the video, comment down below. Check out the channel, all that great stuff. And yeah, we'll see you all next week.